Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study of a philosophy of theism by Borden Parker Bowne. We have reached the midpoint of the book, and it's time to do our Phenomenology composite of pages 1 to 139. So we're at the midpoint. It's time to look at the overall picture, and by now you should be familiar with our phenomenology chart. The bottom is the realm of the sensate, the top is the realm of the true, the left is the subjective, the right is the objective, but everything is numbered, so we should be able to look at this composite as we did with metaphysics and with ethics. Now we look at this composite with regard to theism. So let's begin with block 1, the lower left corner. And to begin with, we must look within the mind itself to move from sensate object to religious object. Bowne says there is a germ of religious impulse within the self. This impulse must be stimulated objectively and stimulated subjectively. And then we critically restrain and correct that which we acquire by the intellect and by conscience. Then we move through that second moment of negation and affirmation. Stimulus of impulse comes from sensation, intellect, conscience, affections, and revelation. We negate anything opposing the rational foundation of the theistic idea. We are to understand the worth of theistic consciousness. Theism is posited as a hypothesis for an explanation of phenomena. We must negate Kant's assertion that ideals of reason have no objective significance. Then we move on to block 3 in our first real step into this work. We begin our gathering of ideals in the realms of the intellectual, the emotional, and the aesthetic, and the ethical. This is the first stage of working over of sensate experience to meet our mental necessities. We progress only so far at this stage as to identify things in their fixed classes. We don't really reach the notion of the true, but we do reach kind of a generalization. This inaugurates the interest of the cognitive nature. At this stage, we are projecting our subjective interest upon nature, but we must next proceed to acquiring the truths of the real that make up the intelligible universe. We want to move from contingent experience to unconditioned experience. We must address interaction, law, and system within experience. So out of these discovery of these generalities, we want to move on to the notion of the true, and that means the De Kunta threshold, or the threshold of dialogue in block 4, right in the center. Through dialogue, we reach the stage of understanding. Through dialogue, we acquire those tendencies that point to the eidos ideals. Truth becomes discernible, but we also see it as ordered. We must transition to system with these eidos ideals. Dialogue takes place within a filter of an overarching idea of uniformity. Through this filter of the idea of uniformity, the eidos ideals will emerge. We perceive a universal adjustment of everything to some common uniformity. Notions of the true are always uncompounded eidos ideas. Notions of the true are always uncompounded eidos ideas. That moves us on to that ordering of these eidos ideas, and in this manuscript, that is labeled schema, up in block 5. We posit the eidos ideals as structured according to rational law, an order maintained by eternal reason. The obligatory concept of moral ideal emerges. The obligatory concept of religious ideal emerges. Conscience as state of mind and the eidos ideals creates an obligation to go out of the self in dialectic. But for Bowne, all things are bound up in a common schema. There's your key term, schema. So the interacting content and the adjustment to an eschatological end will help us to construct this schema or system. But that's the theoretical, and we don't remain at the theoretical in Bowne's theology. We know that. So we move on to Block 6 and practical positing. And for this manuscript, it's going to be the posited ontological demonstration. He calls it the dialectic of demonstration. Practical positing begins with the notion of one perfect being. We want reality to confirm and to recognize our theoretical mental construct. This is the posited outgrowth of our subjectivism, but we narrow our positing to that which is valuable to life and valuable to conduct. Through positing, we maintain mutual relation. Self must make the system ontologically real. That's a key statement. Self must make the theoretical system ontologically real. We want to unveil the kingdom of God. We want to make it the structure of being as it should be the structure of being. We want to make kingdom of God ontologically real. We participate in the unitary world ground. This is that positing of the ontological demonstration. That takes us on to praxis in Block 7. Before we get into Block 7, just to recall, remember the internal triad. It's always going to be Block 4, 5, and 6. 4 is uniformity. 5 is schema. 6 is posited ontological demonstration. So it's uniformity, schema, and ontological demonstration. That's your internal triad that is central to this manuscript. Uniformity, schema, and ontological demonstration. So now we'll take a look at 7. Through the dialectic of praxis, we seek to prove our belief. This is the moment of demonstration of belief. We want truth to exist externally in its own right. We visualize the posited real. Our demonstration is directed towards state of mind through externality. We enter the plane beyond mere deduction, participating where the infinite is active as what Bowne calls the omnipresent agent. Freedom of mind assumes a certain element of uniformity regarding value and regarding meaning. Here we participate in those markers of transcendent wisdom that reveal themselves. That takes us on to Block 8. When we get into that work of construction, ontological construction. The dialectic of manifestation or demonstration is our proclamation of faith. We seek response in other minds. The real must be demonstrated. The concept of God emerges. Theism becomes a certainty of life. Unity of world ground becomes our first metaphysical attribute, which is equated with God. So that's that point of where the entire manuscript is headed, to that point where we can actually reach equating unitary world ground with the concept of God. There is a return moment, so if you look at 9, when the subjective necessities of thought encounter the objective necessities of being, the new emerges. The new must be internalized in return moment all the way back to state of mind, which will again inform the entire dialectic. So we have in its entirety, we have pages 1 to 139, a complete phenomenology of theism that is running parallel to a phenomenology of metaphysics and a phenomenology of ethics. Now we have a phenomenology of theism, and if you go back over the past lessons we've had, you'll see those previous 2 composites that we went over. All 3 composites run parallel to each other for Bowne. We never leave that overarching triad of metaphysics, ethics, and theism. But this gives us what we need in the midpoint of the book. We need this because we're going to continue on looking at this dialectic of demonstration, of ontological demonstration. So we've got another 140 pages of ontological demonstration to discuss in the remainder of the book. We've finished the introduction and chapters 1, 2, and 3. That took us to page 139, and it took us to understanding this composite. So the remaining 140 pages or so are going to be addressed to further articulation of ontological demonstration and how we participate in ontological demonstration. Remember your internal triad. Uniformity reveals to us the notions of the true. Schema is the shaping of those causal units into a holistic system, which is a schema. That is then places us under obligation to realize that theoretical when we enter into the dialectic of ontological demonstration. I like that term, the dialectic of ontological demonstration, which parallels that dialectic of righteousness. It does parallel that dialectic of righteousness, so I like them both, ontological demonstration and the dialectic of righteousness. But that's your composite, and your composite internal triad is uniformity, schema, and ontological demonstration. Uniformity, schema, and ontological demonstration, blocks 4, 5, and 6. That's always your central triad to the composite. Blocks 4 right there in the middle, and then 5 and 6 up on top. That's going to give us our Phenomenology of Theism from pages 1 to 139. And next time we travel to chapter 4.